Hello and welcome back. Today we're digging into a piece called the UAE Jurisdictional Strategy and Operational Compliance Guide. It's a really dense roadmap for founders setting up in the Emirates.
It's a lot to unpack, so let's just dive right in.
Okay, so looking at the architecture of this thing, the first and probably biggest opportunity is all about how the information is sequenced. Right now it's categorized by topic, legal, banking, tax, visas.
It's the standard table of contents approach. Very logical if you're, I don't know, a librarian. But does that actually match how a founder experiences this process?
And that's the core issue, isn't it? The feedback here is that the guide needs to be restructured entirely around the business lifecycle, not a legal library. The weakness of this modular structure is that it treats big decisions like entity selection and banking as, separate chapters.
Right, but the guide itself admits they're not separate. They're totally interconnected. So as a reader, I might go through Chapter 1, fall in love with a free zone because it's cheap, and I mentally commit.
You're locked in. Exactly.
I've made my choice.
But you don't realize until maybe Chapter 6, 20 pages later, that the jurisdiction you just picked basically disqualifies you from the banking you need.
You've put the cart before the horse because the guide handed you the cart first. By the time you read about the banking problems, you're already attached to the wrong license.
Exactly. So the suggestion is to completely reorganize the document to follow the critical path of a real business. It shouldn't be these topic buckets. It should flow chronologically.
So like strategy first.
Yes. Strategy definition, then entity selection, and then, this is the crucial part, a bankability check.
Ah, okay.
And only then do you move to operational setup, compliance, and maybe exit or scale.
That bankability check as its own stage, that's the pivot. It stops the reader cold until they know they can actually operate. But how do you make that concrete in the text? What does that really look like?
Well, let's take the section Preparing for Bank Account Success. It's near the end right now. A much stronger approach is to pull the bank readiness file concept, your business plan, proof of funds, and integrate it directly into the choosing the right UAE jurisdiction section.
So you're telling the reader, don't even look at a license until you have this file ready.
Yes. You make the paperwork the prerequisite for the choice itself. Another example, look at the business reality section. It has that persona, the software firm.
Right. Billing global subscriptions.
Currently, it's just a descriptive example. But in a life cycle structure, you would immediately link that persona to the recurring obligation section.
So instead of finding out about bookkeeping requirements 10 pages later, the text would say, if you are this software firm in this free zone, you must budget for these audit rules right now because your bank will demand it.
Yes. It just bridges that gap between the idea and the administrative reality. It connects the dots for the reader in real time.
I'd also say that the whole planning for future changes or closure section, it's just buried at the end. It feels like an afterthought. The oh, by the way, if you fail chapter?
And the text has a fantastic phrase in there. It calls it the compliance shadow.
It's a great phrase, this lingering liability from a company you didn't close properly. If we move that warning right up to the introduction, you frame the exit strategy as a key factor in your first choice.
You're not just picking a license.
No, you're picking your ability to leave cleanly later on.
The whole shift from buying a product to managing a life cycle is key. And that leads right into our second point. We touched on it, but the single biggest friction point is banking.
Absolutely. It's the make or break factor. But the guide treats bank account success as just another subheader. It has the same weight as, say, office rental.
But the reality, which the text implies but doesn't really shout, is that without a bank account, your company is a ghost. It's just paper. It can't do anything. The weakness is that by burying this, the guide lets the reader get attached to high-risk ideas before they understand the reality.
It's dangerous. So, what if we elevate bankability from a chapter to the primary filter for everything?
That's the core suggestion. Reframe the entire guide around one concept, the bankable entity. Every piece of advice, mainland versus free zone, should lead with the question, how does a bank's compliance officer see this?
That would mean some pretty sharp edits in the early sections. For instance, the three main structures section mentions offshore companies. It says they frequently encounter restrictions.
It's a little polite, isn't it?
Way too polite. It's a euphemism.
The feedback here is to just explicitly label offshore companies with a banking friction warning in a red box. Something visual. Don't just say they have restrictions. Explain why. Explain that banks see them as high-risk shells.
You need to scare them a little with the truth. And what about the personas? It mentions the EU consultant who needs clean international invoicing.
Right. Today the text just focuses on their invoicing. But a bankable entity guide needs to explicitly state that their choice has to be cross-referenced with the bank's own filters, like counterparty quality and geographic risk.
Geographic risk. That's a key term. If that consultant's clients are in places the UAE central bank flags as high risk, a cheap license might technically allow it.
But the bank's algorithm will kill the account.
Exactly. The guide has to say, your license lets you do this, but does your bank? Because if the answer is no, the license is basically worthless.
One other area on this point is the holding structure section.
Right. Separating assets, good legal strategy.
It is. But we have to filter that through source of funds and source of wealth. The critique is to warn the reader that while a holding company is great for legal protection, if it has no demonstrable operational substance, a key phrase from the banking section, it might not even get an account.
That's a huge trap. You could spend thousands setting up a structure that's just paralyzed.
Right. And the guide has to warn them about that immediately, not 10 pages later. Don't let them build a Ferrari and then find out there's no gas.
Which flows perfectly into the third major point, the money. The section building a realistic cost understanding. It's factually correct. It lists all the line items.
It does. But the weakness is that it's all abstract. It warns about hidden expenses in prose. It expects the reader to sort of calculate these risks in their head.
And readers are optimists. They read something like budgeting demand separating formation from sustained operations, and they just nod along thinking, sure, I'll do that. But they're not doing the math.
No. So the suggestion is to replace the descriptive paragraphs with cost simulation case studies. We need to actually see the numbers. Contrast the cheap start with the operational reality.
I love that idea. So for the electronics trading company persona, how do we visualize that?
Okay, imagine a side-by-side table. Scenario A is the mistake. It shows the remote free zone license cost, say $4,000. Looks great.
Very attractive.
Then scenario B is the reality. And scenario B adds everything else mentioned in the guide. The customs codes, the logistics partnerships, the VAT tracking software, and crucially, the physical office you need to prove substance to the bank.
So that cheap $4,000 license is suddenly, what, a $30,000 commitment?
Exactly. It just paints a completely different picture. It saves the reader from the trap. Or take the digital marketing agency. The text mentions the flexi-desk option.
Which is always the cheapest thing on the menu.
It is. But we need to show the real cost of that choice. Show how a flexi-desk saves you money now, but then triggers a bank rejection from the banking section due to a lack of credible UAE presence.
Which then forces a costly, rushed office upgrade later, so the simulation shows option 1, flexi-desk plus bank rejection plus emergency upgrade equals expensive and stressful.
Versus option 2, proper office from day one, which is cheaper in the long run. It just moves the advice from being theoretical to being financial. It forces the reader to face the budget reality up front.
And that also touches on the final point, doesn't it? The tone of the whole document. Right now it reads like a really good textbook. It's objective, it's here are the rules.
Yes, it reads like an objective manual until the very last paragraph, where it suddenly mentions Mainland and the author. The weakness is that the tone is passive. Phrases like mainland licensing becomes strategically superior when it's informative, but it doesn't position the author as the necessary guide.
It creates distance. It informs you, but it doesn't make you feel like you actually need their help. It's almost too helpful in a generic way. It lacks a point of view.
So the suggestion is to shift the voice from just describing the rules to interpreting the nuances. We want to weave that consultant's voice into the narrative from the beginning.
So instead of just stating regulations, the text should own the insights.
Exactly. Use phrases like, "we have seen," or our strategy implies, or even we typically advise.
Let's try to apply that. The implementing governance section. It says basic controls include dual approval.
Right. Sounds like a compliance manual. Instead, frame it as, we advise clients to implement dual approvals to prevent the internal disputes that we've seen complicate exits.
That's a subtle but really powerful shift. It says, we know this because we've seen it go wrong for other people. It hints at experience.
It hints at the scars of experience, yeah. What about the section on linking visas and residency?
The text says, office size influences quota. It's just a fact.
It's a fact, but let's add the consultant's foresight. Phrase it like a strategic warning. We often see software teams overcommit to office space early. We recommend starting with minimum visas and scaling the quota later.
Now that's actionable advice. It saves the reader money, and it positions the author as a partner who's looking out for you.
One last example, the corporate tax section. It just explains the 0% versus 9% rules.
Which is standard info. You can Google that.
True. So we need to pivot from stating the rule to offering active advice. Something like, founders should treat these as ongoing systems, which is why we emphasize setting up audit-ready records from day one.
Audit-ready records. That phrase implies a standard of quality that the consultant can help you reach.
Exactly. It changes the document from, here is what the law says, to, here is how you survive and thrive under the law. It makes the call to action at the end feel earned, not just tacked on. It builds trust from page one.
It really seems like these four things all work together. You restructure the timeline, you filter everything through the bank, you show the real costs, and then you guide them with an experienced voice.
That sums it up perfectly. It turns mere information into actual strategy.
So, to recap the main action items.
First, ditch the topic-based structure. Move to a lifecycle structure that mirrors the founder's actual path. Don't let them pick a license before they understand the banking fallout from that choice.
Second, elevate bankability to the #1 decision filter. Every single choice, every jurisdiction has to be checked against the bankable entity standard. If a bank won't touch it, the strategy is flawed.
Third, use concrete cost simulations. Get rid of the abstract warnings. Build side-by-side scenarios for those personas, the trader, the consultant, that show the real all-in cost of a cheap start versus an operational one. Make the invisible costs visible.
And finally, inject that active consultant's voice. Stop just describing the landscape, interpret it. Use "we advise" and "we have seen" to own the expertise and guide the reader through all the nuances a textbook leaves out.
It transforms the document from a map into a Sherpa.
A perfect analogy.
We'd love to see how you implement these changes. Perhaps for the next round, you could submit the bank readiness file template itself or one of those cost simulation scenarios. We'd be keen to see how you visualize that data.
Absolutely. Seeing the numbers on the page is always where the rubber meets the road.
Thank you for submitting your work. We look forward to seeing the next draft. Until then, keep refining.
Take care.